Good evening and welcome to Chicago Public Library. I'm Jennifer Lezak with the Cultural, Civic, and Literary Engagement team, and on behalf of everyone at CPL, welcome. We want to especially welcome you to Chicago Public Library throughout 2023 as we celebrate our 150th anniversary year with a variety of events, celebrations, partnerships, and digital content for all ages all throughout the year. For more information on everything we have going on, visit chipublib.org/150 throughout the year. Before we begin, we ask that you please silence your cell phones. I would like to thank the Chicago Public Library staff who worked to make this event possible. Books are available for purchase in the lobby, courtesy of our friends at the bookseller, and the authors will sign books at the conclusion of the program. We will call you up to get your books signed in groups, so please remain seated after the program and wait for instructions. Tonight's event is also being live streamed on CPL's YouTube and Facebook channels and will be available for on-demand viewing immediately following the event. After the conversation, our guests will take questions from the audience, from those who line up at the microphone in front of the stage. Virtual viewers, please put your questions in the chat. Tonight, Chicago Public Library is pleased to welcome a special event with two wonderful Chicago authors in honor of CPL's 150th anniversary and our summer reading celebrations. Monica Eng is a veteran award-winning Chicago journalist who has covered food in Chicago for 4 decades. She has written and reported on food, health, and culture at the Chicago Sun-Times, Tribune, and WBEZ. Today, she is a senior writer at Axios Chicago. David Hammond wrote the food detective column for the Sun-Times for several years and is now dining and drinking editor for New City Chicago magazine. He also writes about food, drink, art, and archaeology for Wednesday Journal, Chicago Tribune, and Better. He's a founding member of the LTHforum.com site, a site celebrating Chicago's mom and pop restaurants. So, Italian beef and hot dogs get the headlines. Cutting-edge cuisine and big-name chefs get the Michelin stars. But Chicago food shows its true depth in classic dishes conceived in the kitchens of immigrant innovators, neighborhood entrepreneurs, and mom-and-pop visionaries. Monica and David's book, Made in Chicago, Stories Behind 30 Great Hometown Bites, draws on decades of exploring the city's food landscape to serve up 30 can't-miss eats found in all corners of Chicago. So, are you hungry yet? Please join me in welcoming Monica and David to the CPL stage.
Testing. All right, thanks everyone for coming out on this lovely night. I'm so glad you could make it downtown. I'm Monica Eng. That's Dave Hammond. And so I started working on this book pre-pandemic, like 2019. Because I had an editor of mine, an editor friend, said, Monica, you've done all these stories for Curious City, which is a show that I worked for at WBEZ, about food history. You did some at the Tribune, you did some at the Sun-Times. Why don't you compile these? And I said, you know, Bruce, who is a hot dog scholar, that is such a thing, he'd written several hot dog books. I said, Bruce, I don't have time to do it. I don't have time to wash my hair, as you can see. I don't have time to write a book. And so I said, no thanks. And then I ran into David at a party. A mutual friend of ours was releasing a book, of all things. And I said, can you believe if people think I have time to write a book? Boy, it would be nice if I had someone who could help me. And you said... So I said, if only someone would help me, and you said, why don't you grab this mic?
Okay. I jumped at the opportunity because I think one of the most fulfilling aspects of writing this book is I was able to explore foods that I've been eating all my life. I pretty clearly remember the first time I went up to a little stand or trailer, whatever it was, and bought a Chicago corn roll tamale because it was the least expensive thing on the menu. And since then, I've had most of the foods in this book, but not all of them. And I think that's true for you too, right, Monica? You had, so I had to go and actually try. There were like 3 or 4 foods I'd never had before, one of which was amazingly good, and I'll relate that to you, of course. Some of them were just downright bizarre, which I also find fascinating. Why is it that these foods that seem so unusual and sometimes downright repulsive are popular. And we can talk a little about that too. This was also an opportunity. Jennifer was nice enough to mention that I had founded LTH Forum with a number of other friends. LTH Forum is a site that focuses on little mom and pop restaurants. Do you have another mic? Maybe that's what we need.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. Here, let me grab this back. So while we're dealing with technical difficulties, so we had to decide how are we going to come up with this list. And we decided that we needed an even number, so we chose 30. And we decided that they had to have stood the test of time and have a great story behind them and have been served in at least 2 to 3, hopefully more than one restaurant. So we came up with this wonderful list. We pitched it to University of Illinois Press, which was starting an imprint just about Midwest foodways. And without further ado, we're going to tell you about them. We're going to quiz you on how many you've eaten, and we're going to quiz you on if you know the names of these. And those who have eaten the most of these Chicago treats may get a very special prize at the end of this. So if you can remember in your mind, or if you have a piece of paper and a pen, keep a running list, because it could give you riches, culinary.
I'll just finish the comments I was making there at first. LTH Forum is focused on these little mom and pop places, and when Chicago gets attention for its food, it's usually the Michelin stars, the James Beard Award winners, all of which very worthy and deserving of attention. But there are a lot of little places around Chicago that are also doing a wonderful job with more rudimentary ingredients, let's say. And we thought they deserved some attention too. And they're probably foods, unlike those higher end places, that most people in Chicago have had at one point or another. So that's why I was excited about writing the book.
All right, so we're going to start telling you about a few, and then we're going to go through the speed round, and then we're going to ask you if you've had them, and then we'll take some questions. So first off, anybody, we're not supposed to say the name. Okay, so who's had a Jibarito? Raise your hand or clap your hands. All right, Jibarito. This is a Puerto Rican dish that I wrote about for the Chicago Tribune in the 90s, and instead of using bread, they take green plantains, slice them, smash them, slice them, fry them, smash them, fry them again, and make what I think is the best sandwich in Chicago. I met the inventor of the Jibarito. His name is Juan C. Figueroa, and he told me, Monica, I was down on my luck. My dad had, bankrolled a whole bunch of different businesses for me, mostly liquor stores. And I sent him down the tube. But then one day, I was reading El Vocero newspaper, and there was a recipe for something called a sandwich de plátano, and I tried it, and my dad tried it, and he said, put this on the menu. I'm going to Puerto Rico for a vacation. 2 months later, he came back, and that restaurant that was almost moribund had lines around the block. And now you can find the Jibarito in at least 5 states, in places all over Chicago, and even now in Puerto Rico, which is like a fascinating way for foods that were inspired by a country, like say fortune cookies, being invented here and then actually going back to the country of origin.
I have to do this, Monica. I know it embarrasses you a little. Figueroa, the guy who invented the Jibarito, made some comments to a website reporter a few years ago, and I found it online. I thought it was too good to pass up. A woman was in the hospital. She sent her daughters out to get sancocho, which is a Puerto Rican stew. They came back, but they brought it from the wrong place. They should have gotten it from Borinquen, she said. So she and her daughters went back there, and this is Juan Figueroa speaking. They came in a few weeks later when she was out of the hospital and brought her daughter, who was really an important food critic named Monica Eng. At that time, Monica worked for the Chicago Tribune. She must have had the burrito sandwich and really liked it. She put a review in her paper, and the rest is history. At that time, I would have lines of 30, 40, sometimes 50 or 60 people outside my doors and halfway down the block. So thank you, Monica, for introducing Chicago to the Jibarito.
You're welcome, but it was not because of me. It's because it's a terrific sandwich, and it was, this is like pure Chicago Puerto Rican. I'm part Puerto Rican, and I thank my grandmother, my late grandmother, for telling me to go to Borinquen to get it. All right, next up. Oh, so this was the last place that I saw one. I spent hours trying to find a picture of him. I know I had a picture of him holding it, but I haven't seen him in years. But this was a place that was on Belmont that he was working for his nephew the last time I saw him. He had like 5 restaurants, and he was the toast of the town, and then he forgot to pay his taxes, and then his wife left him, and things went down the drain, and I haven't been able to see him in a while. But I hope he's doing okay. Sorry to end it on a downer. All right, David, what's this?
The mother-in-law. One of the sandwiches.
Who's had a mother-in-law?
Yeah, has anyone?
A food one.
What? Did someone tentatively raise their hand over there? No? The mother-in-law, as sold at Fat Johnny's on the south side in Marquette Park, is a poppy seed roll, much like you'd find on a Chicago hot dog. There's a Chicago corn roll tamale laid into it, and you've probably seen those. If you go to like hot dog stands or Italian beef places, they have tamale on the menu. These aren't the kind of tamales made by abuelas in the back rooms of Mexican restaurants. These are a machine-made, industrial process, extruded cornmeal with a little magenta core that is meat, maybe? Chili on top, onions, sport peppers, and tomato. Onions, tomato, sport pepper, a little bit again like the Chicago hot dog. So why is it called the mother-in-law? Well, there is one explanation. Monica?
Because it also gives you heartburn. Ba-dum-bum.
Apologies to mother-in-laws everywhere. I did see something like this in Mexico City at the Witches Market, which is a great place to go. It's part of the Mercado de Sonora, which is massive. It's huge. And there's a little Quonset hut in there where they sell potions and amulets and bark that you can use in various magical formulas. Outside of it, they had concessions. So we stopped. I was coming out. I saw a long line at one. I didn't know what they were offering there, but I got in line figuring, well, it's probably good if all these people are waiting for it. What they were selling was a guajolota, which is a tamale in a bun with green sauce on top. And I had it, and it was pretty good. It's breakfast food in Mexico. It's quite popular in Mexico City. It's a huge carbo-calorie overload. I mean, if you go into work that day, that's what you want to have for breakfast. So how did it get the name mother-in-law? Well, there is, as I mentioned, there's a green sauce on this guajolota. There is a salsa in Mexico called salsa de suegra, mother-in-law sauce. A connection? I don't know. But it's at least as good as Monica's explanation for why they call it the mother-in-law. And yes, it's available at Fat Johnny's, rarely on the north side. It seems to be more of a south side thing. They do have these and like 5 or 6 other Chicago original foods at The Hat. It's a place on North Avenue near Western. It's just a little diner place, but they have the mother-in-law, the big baby, rib tips, Chicago hot dog. It's a great place to go if you have people in from out of town, maybe if you've given them the book for Christmas, for instance, and they come in and they want to go to some of these places, try some of this food. You can go to The Hat and on the north side and have like 5 or 6 of these rather than driving all over town. That's the mother-in-law.
All right. Who's ever had this? Raise your hand. Pizza puff. I had no idea that pizza puff was invented in Chicago until I started doing this book. I had never eaten a pizza puff, but I have since learned that it is a rite of passage after school, especially on the south side, to have a pizza puff covered in mild sauce. And I had no idea that this went back 100 years to, let's see, an Assyrian Christian from Iran who came here and started turning baby buggies into push carts for hot dog push cart salesmen. So he had a business where he rented this equipment. Ooh, I think I've broken the clicker. I hope not. And so he went and he had a colleague who made tamales for him. But one day he went to the guy's house and he found out the guy died. And his wife said, "We don't have anything to give you except for this tamale recipe." So he said, "Okay, I'll take the recipe." He started making tamales and selling them. And how do you cook these tamales? The same way you cook a hot dog. So much of what came about is, did you already have the cooking equipment? So you could steam or boil these tamales in that same baby carriage that you're selling your hot dogs in. And he started what's called Il Taco, the Illinois Tamale Company. So his son, Warren Shabazz, so this was Elisha Shabazz, his son, Warren, he took over the company in the 60s, and he was delivering these hot dog supplies to now bricks and mortar hot dog places. And they're like, you know what, Warren, we are getting killed by this new thing called the pizzeria. Can you make something for us that could compete with the pizzeria? Well, what did they have at these new bricks and mortar hot dog places? Something called a deep fryer to make their French fries. So Warren went back to his warehouse. He got some flour tortillas, and he got some tomato sauce and some cheese and some meat, and he started wrapping sort of like panzerotti / burrito. And when he finally got it so it would not explode in the French fry oil, he brought it to his customers, and voila, that is why pizza puffs are sold at pretty much only hot dog places in Chicago. And now this is sold in 38 states. You can even get it hot at Jewel these days.
15 flavors of
15
pizza puff
flavors,
now available.
yeah, including
pizza
Reuben
being one of them, yeah.
and gyros and ham and cheese. So I talked to Teresa Ma, who was the very first Chinese-American representative in Springfield. She said she lived on these during her first campaign.
They're delicious. I was surprised how much I liked it. I had mistaken them initially for
Totino's Pizza
Totino's
Rolls.
Pizza Rolls, and they're way different.
Yeah. So that's the Pizza Puff and its 100-year origins in Chicago, the child of tamales and hot dogs, sort of. All right, who's drunk this? Don't lie. Don't lie if you've had this. Oh, we got a bunch of degenerates in the audience.
This is, I think, one of the great Chicago in-jokes. It's called Malort. It's a liqueur, a bitter liqueur, that was started being sold around 1912 in Chicago as medicine, which is why they were able to sell it through Prohibition. It was medicinal. Carl Jeppsson, a guy from Sweden, started it. Malort means wormwood in Swedish. And wormwood is a key ingredient in absinthe as well, which is actually why absinthe was banned in the European Union and the United States for many years, because early in the last century, a French guy, Jean Lefray, allegedly drank a bunch of absinthe containing wormwood and went mad. He went crazy, murdered his family, terrible story. So terrible, in fact, that they decided to... Did my mic just go off? No, it's still on.
It still sounds good.
So terrible, in fact, that they banned absinthe. Then they realized that, wormwood doesn't really cause madness and blindness and homicidal tendencies. So now absinthe can be used, wormwood can be used in absinthe and Malort. Malort. Becoming more popular with every year. In 2012, there were 1 million shots of Malort sold. In 2012. In 2022, there were 8 million shots of Malort sold. It's getting more popular. Now, find, if you can, in the history of world commerce, any other product that's marketed based on its repulsiveness.
Besides our book.
Oh, come on. Yes, besides our book. You can see what they're appealing to here. Jeppsson is a liquor so old. They call it Jeppsson for some reason rather than Malort. So bold, rugged, brash, and rough, your first sip rudely warns, look out, here I come. Well, this company was recently purchased by CH Distillery in Chicago, and they're making it in the plant where they used to make, right next to where they used to make Green River, which was also made in Chicago. We didn't cover it in our book because it's a mass-produced product and didn't seem right to do that. For those of you who have had Malort, did any of you enjoy that sip? No?
No, not me. David, there was an advertising campaign where they asked people for
Thank
slogans.
you for reminding me. Yeah, they tried to crowdsource some slogans or taglines from Malort, so they solicited these suggestions from the Malort-loving public, and people came up with lines like, Malort, when you want to unfriend someone in person.
or Malort, tonight's the night you fight your dad.
That's my favorite one. Yeah, I mean, people recognize that it's uniformly unliked, and yet some people definitely like it. We gave a presentation at the Arts Club of Chicago, kind of a fancy pants place, and we asked, has anyone here had Malort? And a few people did. They raised their hands. Afterwards, this very distinguished gentleman came up to me and said, I didn't want to say it in this room, but I have Malort every night. He has it. He said he loves this stuff. He has it a little like liqueur snifter thing. Yeah, it's one of those flavors like chitlins or liver that some people may love and other people just can't understand why others would consume it. So it goes with Malort.
And later this fall, we're going to a festival in Champaign-Urbana where Malort is the sponsor of the festival. So we have a feeling, that's what I looked like when I was on WGN and I had my first Malort.
It's called Malort Face. If you search hashtag Malort Face on Instagram, you'll see pictures of unsuspecting tourists who came to Chicago, met up with a buddy from Chicago who probably said something like, hey, can I buy you a shot of Chicago's own spirit, Malort? Yeah, sure. They buy it, sip it, make a bad face, snap the picture, put it on Instagram.
Yeah,
They're hilarious photos.
Thanks so much for
You're
doing
welcome.
that. Yeah. Okay, who's ever had akutagawa? All right, we got a couple. This was a dish that was born in Wrigleyville in the post-World War II period where a lot of Japanese Americans were forcibly resettled to Chicago. They were told, don't go back to California. We don't want you bunching up together for your own good. So they brought them all over the country, and then Wrigleyville was one of those spots. And there was a restaurant called Hamburger King run by Joe Yamauchi. 2 doors down, the oldest bar in Wrigleyville. Who knows what the oldest extant bar in Wrigleyville is? Yes, in the back? Nisei Lounge, that's right. 2 doors down from Hamburger King was the Nisei Lounge, and there a man named George Akutagawa used to love to watch Cubs games and drink in the afternoon. And when he had a belly full of beer, he would walk 2 doors down and tell his friend Joe Yamauchi, hey, Joe, I'd like some food. I need to kind of wet the beer. And he'd say, all right, George, what do you want? George says, could you throw some green pepper and hamburger meat and onions, and can you find some bean sprouts to throw them on the grill and then crack a couple eggs over them and serve it with your famous rice and gravy? And he said, sure, George. So George would get that just about every day of the season, and soon folks were like, hey, what's that guy having? And he said, I don't know, we'll just call it the Akutagawa. And that was the birth more than 50 years ago. And there's George Akutagawa, and there's the Hamburger King. And his friend Joe, kept it on the menu even after George left. George went back to Hawaii, and we think that this may have some origins in a Hawaii dish called
Loco Moco.
Which is, has anyone ever heard of Loco Moco? It's kind of a mashup. There you go. Or okonomiyaki, which is actually translates to kind of whatever you want, where you can throw a whole bunch of stuff in an omelet. Some people think it's sort of like egg foo young. And so in any case, it was Asians trying to assert themselves as Asian at a time when they were told, stop being so Japanese. And so I love that it's now served at other places where Hamburger King chefs went, the Fullerton Cafe, Susie's in Rogers Park. And even though Hamburger King is not on the awning anymore, the menu is still pretty much the same in that building, 2 doors down from the Nisei Lounge at what's called Rice and Bread now. Hi, George. All right, what are these?
This is one of the foods I discovered writing the book that I really like quite a lot, and it surprised me. Do you know these? Have you had these? No? Taffy Grapes. They're not everywhere. I found them, there are places like Harold's Chicken King or Baba's Steak and Lemonade places, or the little quick service food places you find along Madison going into the city.
Sharks, JJ's.
Yeah. They're usually right there at the cash register in little plastic clamshell containers, and it's extraordinarily simple. It's a green grape dipped in, can be white chocolate, dark chocolate, can be frosting, any kind of adhesive solution.
Glue.
Glue would work. And then you sprinkle nuts on top. And so why the name Taffy Grapes? I think the thinking behind this was that much like a taffy apple, or as Affy's apple, as we call them in Chicago, you have a fruit covered in candy with nuts sprinkled over the top. And they sell these in little containers. It's like $5 for maybe, 18, 2 dozen. We've made these at home. They're extraordinarily simple to make. In fact, they can only be made by human hands. No machine has yet been developed, and probably never will be, to make taffy grapes. But yeah, they're that easy. They're delicious. They're a great little snack after you have some Harold's fried chicken or a sweet steak sandwich. And at Harold's, it's probably the healthiest thing you're going to find on the menu there. So yeah, give it a try. I think they're delicious.
All right, so take a gander at these and make a mental note of how many you've eaten. And these are going to be the answers to the quiz you see. So I'm going to take them off the screen really fast so you don't cheat. All right, who knows what these are? Shout it out. Rib tips. And what's in the middle for bonus points? A link. So tips and links. There you go. So give yourself a point if you've had tips and links. All right, yay, you see that. Okay, and the place that probably brought rib tips to Chicago was the original Lem's, Miles Lemons. Started it, and then his brother started this one, and the daughters are taking
I think it's so incredible that he could take a throwaway item like
Yeah.
rib tips, just like with, as we'll see with the Gampong chicken wings, something that would in the past have been maybe discarded as not worthy of sale to customers, and making something delicious out of it. I think
these
that's
were the gnarly bits at the
awesome.
end of a beautiful rack. If you want to make the rack nice and even, you cut these off, feed them to the cooks. In this case, Miles Lemon said, let's feed them to the customers as well. And now they are a Chicago staple. All right, what's
most
this?
of you undoubtedly know this one.
Shout it out. Italian beef, what's on top of it? That's right.
A
all
particularly
right.
pepper-heavy giardiniera. Yeah, this we might want to replace that shot. It was not from Al's, and I can tell that because Al's
Anybody know
giardiniera.
why it's not from Al's?
Yeah,
Al's is all celery. They
All
stopped
celery.
putting peppers in
they
there.
do put pepper flakes in
put
it, so
pepper
there
flakes.
is a little
Because
heat.
Chris Pacelli said he got lazy. He was tired of cutting peppers, so he's like, it's the same if I just put pepper flakes in it.
He said, can I just add a footnote to that? Pacelli said, or Pacelli, who's the son of Al Pacelli Sr., who was the partner of Al Ferrari, who opened Al's number one. He said that Al's beef started as a front for a gambling operation. His dad got out of jail and was kind of casting about for something to do, and one of his buddies said, hey, let's start a gambling operation. So, I mean, literally, that's the quote I got from this guy. And so they did with beef as like the presumed commodity they were selling there, and in back they were running a bookie joint. And he said, no, this is what Pacelli said. I take this with a grain of giardiniera. He said that a lot of beef places in Chicago, and he mentioned a few, and I'm not going to mention them because I have no evidence to support. He said a lot of these early Italian beef places were started as fronts for gambling operations. True, false, I don't know. That's the myth from a guy who was there.
And the interesting thing is he said that they got so popular that they decided to go straight. They're like, you know what? I can make plenty of money off these sandwiches. I'm going to lose the bookie. All right, anybody ever have this delicious Southside treat featuring corned beef, Italian beef, gyros, gyro sauce, because that's what you got to call it, and giardiniera? Nobody's had one. Nobody even knows what it's called. The gym shoe. That's right. Give yourself a point if you know it or if you've eaten it. After months and months, actually years of trying to find the originator of gym shoe, I had about as much luck as geneticist Peter Engler, who had been studying this for a while. He had this great story about how he was finally it was 20th place, asking the owner of a South Side substand through bulletproof glass, can you tell me who started the gym shoe? Where did it come from? And he said that he thought this was the moment he was going to find out because the guy's assistant came up to him and tapped him on the shoulder. He said, I know. So Peter said, oh, you know who invented where the gym shoe came from? And he said, yes, it comes from the mind. So
You know, it is kind of stoner food, but I think all those different meats on there is kind of what you find on a sub sandwich, you know?
Well, and it's already in the place. So
Yeah,
all
right.
of these
The
ingredients
ingredients
are already
they
there.
have. What can we make with all this stuff? A gym shoe.
Oh, and excuse my Jordanian accent, but I did interview a Jordanian sub shop owner who told me he invented the gym shoe. And I said, oh, really? So how did you invent it? He said, there was a guy high on weed coming through my drive-thru at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he said, hey, man, give me 3 meats. He said, how about if I throw 3 meats on a gym shoe? He said, no problem, man. I'm like, that's amazing, Haitham, Mr. Al-Abadi. When did you invent this? He said, 2007. I'm like, come on. There were credible sightings in 1980. So I wished I could have used that story, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
All right, gym shoe. All right, what's this? Shout it out. Maxwell
Yeah, good. You
Polish,
gave it the
that's
full
right.
name, too. Maxwell Polish Sausage.
All right.
And there they are making the Polish sausages at Jim's Original, which used to be right on Maxwell Street at Halstead and Maxwell.
Now on Union.
Now it's on Union. Yeah, and now it used to be open 24 hours a day, but Mayor
Thanks,
Lightfoot.
Lori Lightfoot.
Yep, she
didn't want people hanging around.
allegedly
24
because it was a crime magnet.
Yeah.
Maybe, who knows? Anyway, I remember going to Maxwell Street in like the late 60s looking for a carburetor for a 49 Ford, and which you could get in those days. In the old days of Maxwell Street, they say you could get anything you want at the Cheat You Fair.
Nothing stolen, yeah.
And I remember standing on the street across from Jim's and just smelling the onions coming out of there, which was just intoxicating. And it still is. If you go to Jim's Original, you can be down the block. You're going to smell those onions that have been sitting on the grill all day, cooking with the Polish sausage. And it's fantastic. Convenient, cheap, filling, and delicious.
And
are
now the
keys.
Jim's on Elston makes Polish sausage breakfast burritos, which are probably the best breakfast burrito I've ever had. You must try them. All right, what is on this chicken? Anybody know? What is on this chicken? Mild sauce. Thank you very much. I think I know who the winner's going to be. Mild sauce can be different at every different place you go to, but at Harold's, it's usually, I think, the most delicious. So South Side Harold's mild sauce is great. West Side Uncle Remus, they like it a lot sweeter. I asked so many people, where did this come from? And the best theory I got was 1950s-ish. When a lot of fried chicken places opened, people would say, do you want some ketchup or you want some hot sauce for your chicken? And people would equivocate, well, how about something in between? So they just started mixing the two together and then called it mild sauce, because that's kind of what it tastes like. But the inventors just swear that it's so much more.
I got to say, this is one of the foods that kind of doesn't do anything for me. But I think if I grew up with, I had it for the first time like 2 years ago. I think if I had grown up with it on fried chicken in particular, I think I would come to like it. But I'm not that crazy about barbecue sauce, and ketchup I'm okay with, and the combination doesn't help. For me.
Mild sauce. Okay, anybody know what this is? Shout it out. Garrett's Mix, originally called Chicago Mix, but why can't we call it Chicago Mix?
Yeah, it can't be called Chicago Mix by Garrett's anymore.
Some jerks in the Twin Cities patented the name and said we can't call it that.
Minneapolis primarily. Company called Candyland bought the name Chicago Mix in the 90s, and they enforce that mark. I mean, they don't let any other company use the name Chicago Mix, including the company that originated it, Garrett's. So that's why they call it Garrett's Mix now. If you go into a Garrett's, that's what they're selling. And even other people are making they can't call other people are making similar products can't call it Chicago style or anything like that. The Candyland folks are really hard with that mark, which is too bad. Garrett's Mix is all over the world. It's in Singapore, it's in the United Arab Emirates. People love it, and it used to be called Chicago Mix, but now it's Garrett's Mix. It goes the way of Comiskey and Sears Tower.
Okay, anybody know what these what these things are? Yeah, it comes from many different names. Lollipop wings, gampong chicken wings, and Great Sea is the place best known for them. So this little known that it was invented on Lawrence Avenue in Albany Park in the mid-'80s based on an ethnically Chinese Korean dish. So long story short, there were a lot of famines and floods and wars in, let's go back 200 years. This is going to be a short story, I swear. Anyway, so a lot of Shandongese Chinese moved to Korea, and they couldn't get many jobs, or Koreans won't want them, but they did let them have restaurants. So they created all these Chinese restaurants that appealed to Koreans. And then they immigrated to the United States and opened up those very same types of restaurants in Korean American communities. And then they had this dish called gampong chicken, that you just take a whole chicken, you cook it with chilies and garlic and just a little bit of sugar, and they noticed, wait a minute, why are we cooking it with the whole chicken? In America, they sell these wings for so cheap, it's like a garbage cut that they almost throw in the garbage. It's 1980s, pre-Buffalo chicken wings. And so they said, let's make it with all wings. It took off, it went crazy. That was the guy on one part of Lawrence Avenue. These guys, Great Seas guys, said, hey, how about if we squish all the meat to one end so it's a lot easier to eat? Now, all over the nation, you find these, basically, they call them Korean chicken wings, but it started as a Shandongese recipe using the whole chicken, and we turned it into a wings dish here. All right, and that's Great Seas Lollipop Wings, open across the street from the other one. All right, who knows what this is? Opa! Yes.
Flaming Saganaki, which seems to have originated in Chicago, but I was zooming around on the internet over the weekend and I found a place in Australia and in London and in Singapore and in the Philippines selling flaming Saganaki. And I'm guessing it's sold in more than just those 4 or 5 places too. Saganaki comes from the word sagano, which means a little pan in Greek. Saganaki is like a diminutive form of that. It's a little pan. A firm cheese like casseri is put in the pan, doused with ouzo, set on fire. People love it. I love it. In fact, the restaurants now are starting to serve Saganaki without the flame, like the Avli Trattoria people. Louis Alexakis. He opened a place in Lincoln Park recently. They don't flame the Saganaki there, which is cool. They're serving it probably more the traditional way that it would be served in Greece. He has like a little fig jam on top, maybe sometimes a tomato jam, I think, and it's perfectly fine. Me, I kind of like to see the fire. It says celebration, it says Opa. It's kind of fun. Does it add anything to the flavor of the cheese? I don't know about that. It might.
It adds something to the flavor of the fun.
Yes,
the servers
very
hate
flavorful
it.
fun.
We talked to one server who said she dreaded anybody ordering it because it just felt so dangerous to do, and I think it is. All right, who's had this and what is it? That's right, on the south side, gyro. Okay, this guy, okay, we did not invent gyros in Chicago, but we did invent the mass-produced gyros, the one where you can basically just take a slurry of meat and fat and spices and pour it into a big cone.
It doesn't sound that appetizing,
Pressure cook it, and it becomes this like solid piece, chunko meat. And this guy, Peter Parthenes, this is him at like the 1972 National Restaurant Association show. It says, new European food sensation, gyros is here. And he used to sell it and tell people, gyros, it'll turn a profit. And so we mass produced it, and all the biggest mass producers of gyros are still in the Chicago area, even as they consolidate.
And they used to just pack meat onto a spike,
right.
And then that would be it. And now the same company, that Kronos Grecian Delight, makes the tacos al pastor that you can also get, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's certainly a lot easier to buy it that way.
Exactly, so much more. And so this is a fancy version of a Chicago treat.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to give it away. Can you recognize what this is? It's not easy.
There should be potato wedges. That's right,
Chicken Vesuvio. Yeah, I had this at a place called Fioretta, a restaurant in Fulton Market. And when it came to the table, I said to the server, aren't there supposed to be potatoes in here? And he said, oh, there are. You can see those tiny little things in the center there. Those are fingerling potato chips that they made there. And it was a fantastic version. And just they put the little potato chips in there as kind of a signifier of Chicken Vesuvio, even though it doesn't quite fit the paradigm.
All right, who knows what that is? You know, shout it out. Chicago-style hot dog, okay. And if you buy the book, you'll find out the exact origin of every single one of the ingredients on top of it, including the celery salt. Chicago was a celery capital at the turn of the century because everyone thought it was super good for you, and we had sandy soil that would grow celery. Okay, you've heard about this. It is the corn roll tamale, right?
Yeah, these are, I actually had an excellent version at Portillo's not long ago. I mean, these are not so awesome a lot of times when you get them at like a hot dog stand or an Italian beef stand because, well, I got one at Johnny's a little while ago, and it was kind of crusty, and I think what happened was they steam them, and they don't sell, so they put them in the refrigerator. They bring them out the next day, and
How
so
many
you get
months
kind
had
of
that gone back and
kind of
forth?
a gnarly tamale. But Portillo's was really was big. There was a better ratio of meat filling to corn masa on the outside, and it was pretty delicious. I mean, I am not really in favor of those huge chains selling Chicago food, but Portillo's did a hell of a job with that.
All right, who knows what this is? Shout it out. Rainbow cone. Who's ever had one? Who can name all the flavors? Chocolate, strawberry, Palmer House, pistachio, sherbet. Anybody know what's in Palmer House? Cherries and walnuts. Oh, sorry, cherries and pecans. And the the owner's claim had nothing to do with the Palmer House Hotel. We came up with it before the Palmer House Hotel. Built before the Chicago fire? Not sure. Anyway, it's very tasty, and it could have gone extinct because it was just in one spot in Beverly. Now they are all over. They're in a lot of Buona beefs, and they have just inked a partnership with Gino's East.
Oh.
So we'll see what happens. And so this was the original, or the second rainbow cone stand on, I believe, Western and 111th, I want to say. I should read my book and remember. Okay, who knows what this is? Deep dish pizza.
The famous Chicago deep dish pizza. The origin of this dish is in dispute, although Tim Samuelson, the cultural historian for Chicago, is pretty definite that it was not Art Sewell, who usually gets the credit for it. Certainly on the Uno's website, Art Sewell is the only name you're going to find on there. Ike Sewell. It seems like Rick Ricardo, though, who owned a nightclub in Chicago and also owned the building where Uno's is now, had a hand in it. There are stories about him coming back from Italy and raving about, we've got to have this pizza. He thought of it as an appetizer. It evolved to be like a whole big thing. But he died.
He died before Ike, and the person who was left standing gets to tell the story.
He couldn't defend his side of the story, yeah. And Stud Sterkel himself said, Rick Ricardo invented the effing thing, for Christ's sake. So
he didn't say effing.
He didn't.
All right, okay, this is the real Southsiders quiz treat. Anybody know what this combo is called? Baba's steak and lemonade, that's right. So I got a question at Curious City, like, what's with all these Baba's steak and lemonades in all of the south suburbs and the south side? And I finally found the Jordanian man who came up with this combo. And he said that he started a fast food place in Olympia Fields, and these were the two top sellers. And he modeled this lemonade off of something from the Levant, the region of the Middle East that includes Palestine and Jordan and Israel, and it's something called limonana, which is a lemonade, like a slushy lemonade with mint. And so Haitham al-Abadi, he took that really sweet lemonade with mint, and he said, you can choose 3 really sweet syrups that we'll pour in on top of it. And so this is like diabetes in a cup. Is the sweetest thing I think I've ever had. And he serves it with basically a Chicago version of a Philly's cheesesteak. And it's a classic in Chicago, but a little too sweet for me.
And that combination of flavors called a kamikaze or a suicide?
Right. So if you go to Fat Johnny's, you can order something called the kamikaze, where they take all of the sodas and mix them into one cup, and that's a lot like this lemonade. Okay, what are these, David?
This is a tougher one. Chicago egg rolls. Now, something I should have hit a little harder in the book in this chapter is that these egg rolls contain things that you wouldn't find in egg rolls in other places, like jerk chicken and Italian beef, and it works perfectly fine. I mean, you can put almost anything in a fried core like that, and it's going to taste pretty good. But yeah, so these guys on the west side of Chicago, this is Three Kings Jerk. They make a lot of jerk chicken, heroes, and you can have it all in an egg roll if you'd like.
All right. Okay. Now, this actually there's only maybe a few places that still serve this. There used to be a place called Taurus Flavors, and they had a dozen locations in Chicago on maybe the 50s, 60s, 70s. Anybody know what this is? It's called a sweet steak, a steak sweet, a supreme steak, or just a steak sandwich, depending on where you go. All right, you start with some ribeye, you chop it up, and you really do start by making it from scratch each time. Because, David, I waited an hour for mine after I ordered it. How long did you wait at the fast food place?
My wife and I went at the wrong time of day, wrong time. Went at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. The room, which was, I don't know, maybe 15 by 15, small room, 24 people were in there. I counted them when I walked in. I couldn't believe it.
All patiently waiting.
They're all waiting for their steak sandwich, and so we got in line. It took 90 minutes to get the sandwich.
1.5 hours.
I'm sure it took that long for others in the room as well, but everyone was just totally cool about waiting. polite, not going up to the counter every few minutes and saying, hey, is it ready yet? And I think it's because it's a beloved food of the community. This was in Morgan Park. People may have been eating it all their lives, and they love it. So they're willing to wait. And also, it's a social opportunity. I mean, they're seeing their friends and neighbors. They're talking.
For an hour and a
yeah.
half. So I was with someone who said, why don't we go watch a Sox game and come back and maybe our steak sandwich will be ready. So it's ribeye steak chopped up, and then you put in diced onions, and you also griddled that. Then you put 2 pieces of American cheese on it, and then you get a steamed hoagie roll, and you stuff it all in there. Then you put this really bright green relish and pepper thing on it. And then you put giardiniera, and then you put 2 slices of tomatoes, and then you dunk the whole thing for a long time in mild sauce.
Incredibly heavy.
And when you come out with this, you have a warm baby in your arms.
In your bag.
That you've just gestated for an hour and a half. And then I was like, oh, I don't like it. And then I couldn't stop eating it. So.
Yeah, I ate that whole thing.
Yeah.
I did.
All right, what's this giardiniera? We talked about that. It's something only served in Chicago. It's the only place you're going to find brined vegetables in oil as a condiment.
The oil, I think, is key. Yeah. In Italy, you will find something called sotto aceto, which means under acid. And basically, it's cut up vegetables like cauliflower, peppers, and so on in vinegar. And usually it's eaten kind of like an antipasti. You eat it before dinner. Giardiniera is a little bit different because it usually does use oil, and it's used as a condiment rather than something you just eat.
All right, David, we've done it again. We've got 90 seconds left to go through the rest. Okay, so that's
I got it.
Chris Pacelli making...
This is Chris Pacelli making his giardiniera in what he called Italian Tupperware, which is a 55-gallon plastic drum, and he does this like every 2 or 3 days.
He said it. We didn't. All right. Okay, what style of pizza is this? Tavern style, made so that you'll drink more beer in the bar because you're eating this little cracker, salty cracker. Anybody know what this delicious-looking thing is? Pepper and egg sandwich.
Pepper and egg,
right. All right. Anybody know what this double cheeseburger on the south side that always has grilled onions and a pickle and mustard and ketchup? Big Baby. You guys are good. Okay, give yourself a point if you had the Big Baby. Okay.
Shrimp Dijon and a caution. Shrimp Dijon, which is basically shrimp and breadcrumbs, wine, butter, garlic, maybe a little oregano or parsley. I printed in the book a recipe I got out of the Tribune that was said to be, and I think it probably was, given to them by the son of the man who invented shrimp Dijon.
But do not use this recipe.
No. You look at it with amusement. It could have been a typo in the Tribune.
It calls for 14 cups of breadcrumbs and 12 shrimp.
Right. It's basically shrimp-flavored breadcrumbs. It's a delicious dish. And now, I mean, this is something you will find in cities other than Chicago. Not just shrimp Dijon, but cod Dijon, salmon Dijon, and so on.
All right. Okay.
Breaded steak sandwich at Rico Benny's. It's basically like a Milanese or a Wiener Schnitzel, but beef. It's pounded, breaded, fried, rolled with a little bit of cheese in there and tomato sauce. Very popular in some Rico Benny. We went to Rico Benny's one day. Just about every person there was eating one of these. A friend of mine went though, and he said, there were moments when I was absolutely convinced I was eating breaded carpet padding.
Now, give yourself a point if you've eaten the breaded carpet padding. Okay, Maxwell Street, pork chop sandwich.
There's a trick to eating it. You hold on to the bone. There's a bone-in pork chop sandwich, okay? It's a pork chop with a bone.
And now they make a breakfast sandwich, again, with the bone-in pork chop. All right. Now, here's the moment of truth. Have you been tallying up how many of these you've eaten?
More or less.
All right. So who has eaten more than 10? Raise your hand. All right. Who's eaten more than 15? Raise your hand. Okay, who's eaten more than 12? Raise your hand. No? So we got 10 here. We got 12 here. Okay, so first prize goes to this gentleman named Divvy. Please come up to the stage for your prize.
Woohoo!
Sir, you are going to be the proud recipient.
Tell them what they won, Monica.
Of a bottle of Malort. All right.
Yeah, right.
And
share it with the kids.
Young lady, you are the second prize, so you get 2 bottles of Malort. Okay.
I'm sorry, who's the winner there?
For real, you can exchange them for Garrett's mix if you want.
Yeah, if this is too odious an option, you can trade it in for a Garrett's.
Yeah, I brought those,
Garrett's
so
mix.
come up
or
and see us
Chicago
afterwards.
mix. Who, can you give this to the nice lady over there?
So before we take questions, and
Thanks.
we'd love to hear your questions, I just want to say that one of the biggest horrifying realizations I had while I was writing this book is that we are still an incredibly culturally divided city. We are so culturally segregated because I know Northsiders who have never had a sweet steak or a jimshu, and I know Southsiders who have never had the akutagawa or the Jibarito. So we're really hoping people can use this book to say, I want to get to know what my fellow Chicagoans eat, and to travel all over the city and check it all off in the back, and finally say, I've eaten all 30, hooray!
And we did include, in addition to recipes, most of which you could follow at home, we put in names and addresses of places you can go to eat all these foods, put in a few. So it is a great way to explore Chicago, going to neighborhoods you may never have been before, to go in search of these Chicago original foods.
All right, so let's start with any questions from the audience and any from our online audience.
All right, we'll start with an online question, but folks, if you have a question, please come down here so that the people online can hear you ask it. So the question from Sarah, which is, food is such a part of culture and community. Of the dishes that you describe, which one do you think is most at risk of disappearing forever?
Oh, such a good. I would have said Malort or the rainbow cone, but through some really savvy marketing, both of them have gotten a new life.
I would guess the sweet steak, because there are only 2 locations
Right,
in the
Home of the
city
Hoagie, yeah.
that serve it. So I would say get yourself over to Home of the Hoagie in Morgan Park and have a sweet steak while they last.
Yeah, bring a novel to read
steak
while
sweet.
you're waiting. Yeah. All right, great question, sir.
I want to first thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
My admittedly devil's advocate question, of the 30 items or so that you were kind enough to inform us about, let's say I'm extremely health conscious. Which
Don't
one-
read our book for sure, or only read
I was
it.
going to say,
Don't even get near the
that I
book,
should
right?
eat if I'm interested in healthy food, or is that a stupid question?
I guess pepper and egg
Thanks.
sandwich.
And
I'd say stick to the
akutagawa
peppered egg.
akutagawa is pretty
And the akutagawa, yeah, that's just veg and
vegetable
egg.
and ground beef.
So, but stay away from everything else.
Rice?
It's really
yeah,
it's
right,
horrible
for your health. Eat in health.
So in your research about the origins of deep dish pizza, did you find any material that supports the idea that since it was pretty much invented during World War II, period of scarcity, is this a good way to, kind of scam the customer, serving a lot of bread with less meat, less vegetables, just bread and sauce?
That's a
Very
really good-
filling. Yeah, no, I had not heard that theory. It's certainly possible. Yeah, I think it's an interesting
When I was
possibility.
reading some accounts of how Ike Sewell and Rick Ricardo were talking, they did say that they wanted to make something that could be a full meal. And that's why it is so heavy. But it really, like tavern-style pizza, there aren't a lot of precursors in Italy that would sort of correspond to this. This was all just Chicagoans making shit up on their own. Stuff up on their own. And it's so funny, right on this stage a few weeks ago, I was talking to Mark Guarino, who wrote a book about country western in Chicago, and he was told that the reason why they were able to innovate so much with the country music in Chicago is because there was no one saying, you have to do it this way. There weren't a lot of these doctrinaire people, so they were able to experiment a lot more. And a pizza scholar told me that was the same thing in Chicago. You didn't have these Neapolitan purists saying, no, you can't do that. So we could just you can have Ike Sewell saying, oh, let's do this. Rick, okay, let's try this. Hey, let's make some money by getting people to drink more beer, and let's make this cracker-style crust that you really don't find elsewhere.
There is a possible antecedent for deep dish. When Lydia Bastianich was in Chicago to open Italy, I asked her about that, because this was during the, Jon Stewart had made some disparaging comments about Chicago pizza, said it was like a casserole and so on, which is, I can see that. I asked Lydia, I said, is there anything in Italy like deep dish pizza? And she said, in Sicily we have what's called sfincione, which is a really thick bread. honestly, it's not a whole lot like deep dish, except that it's thick. It's very thick pizza. It's kind of like the pizza my grandmother used to make, my Italian grandmother used to make, which was just like biscuit dough wiped with olive oil with oregano and garlic and salt on top. That was it. Really simple. Not as luxurious or as rich as a deep dish pizza, which I now have kind of a hard time eating. I mean, when I was 16, I used to be able to eat half a pie. Now it's like a thin slice is enough.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, man.
This is a funny one to the authors. How much, quote, research did you do in eating to research this book, and which of these is your favorite dishes?
Well, we made sure that that both of us ate all of it, and yeah, I did a lot of research. I mean, Colin, my partner, is attested to that. And we definitely went down to Morgan Park to get the sweet steak, and I ate a lot of Jibaritos and a lot of pizza puffs.
We made a point of eating all of them. Did you eat many of them more than once?
No, and certainly not that that breaded beef sandwich. We had that, and
Which I
like,
liked. Rico
it's
Bene.
too much. But the one I liked most is, true to my Puerto Rican heritage. I love the Jibarito,
Which is wonderful.
It's, the plantains remind me of my grandmother, because my favorite thing was when she would make tostones, which is green plantains fried, and then she'd smear some garlic on it. So, what's not to love about them? How about you, David? What was your favorite?
No, Taffy Grapes.
Taffy Grapes.
No
there
doubt.
You go.
I mean, they're super simple and different than a lot of the other foods on our list. So, yeah, I was attracted to them because I liked them so much and I had never had them before. So, yeah, if next time you're at Harold's, look right next to the register. You'll see a stack of Taffy Grape boxes.
Okay, and I think we have one last question, which is an interesting one too. With the rise of more immigrants in Chicago opening restaurants, are there any dishes that you think will be in a new edition of your book?
That's a really good question, David. You look like you've
after-
got one you're thinking of.
After the first or second presentation that we had done on this book, a friend of mine called and said, "Have you ever had a wapachosa?" And apparently it's sold at Scofflaw, but also Doña Torta, so two places, so it qualifies. And a wapachosa is kind of like the gym shoe. It's like, although it's even more looser than that, it's kind of whatever the meats the chef has available, he puts them on bread, and that's it. So wapachosa, Scofflaw, which is kind of a higher-end bar, was making a fancier version of it. But basically, it's like a Dagwood sandwich.
Wow, and this is another one we forgot. Anybody know what this is? Southsiders, Weber's Bakery, Atomic Cake, right? And I do a podcast with Louisa Chu, and she will not shut up about how I missed out on the Atomic Cake. So that's going to go to the next one too. But I'm sure that we're going to find a lot more, because, I mean, these things are always evolving, and we have so many creative people who can use what they find around here to make something delicious. So thank you all for coming out
thanks a lot.
tonight, and we really enjoyed this.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Monica and David. What a great way to celebrate CPL's 150th and summer reading. So thanks so much for being here. We remind you that their book is available at your Chicago Public Library. Books are also available for purchase in the lobby.